Alright, I noticed this number formatting macro from Chief Academy post by one of the Chief people a couple of days ago. I don't know why this stuff is not more freely shared, because the people at Chief understand this stuff and not many other people do, it seems like. And he's talking about the number formatter. And to me, the more important thing is the use of a proc and the ability to pass values in via this proc object to the number formatter. Now, you don't have to have the number formatter in here. You know, you could have a proc that did whatever you want, and you could use it to pass a value. I'm not going to talk about the number formatter because that's been pretty well discussed. I have a video on my YouTube channel from 4 years ago that goes over the number formatter. So it's been around a while, and it's documented in the documentation, and like I said, I've got a video here, and I've got some other videos. I just searched, I think, for format or formatter or something, and so I've got a bunch of Ruby related stuff in here. If you want additional info on that stuff. So anyway, what I want to talk about is using a proc. And so down here's where he's just created some macros. And this one is called format square feet. This one up here is something else, format feet and inches. And here's where he's calling them. You put this in a label or someplace that you wanted to get this information. And he's using .call. The word call is optional. You need the dot, and I'll show you that in a minute. You need the dot, but you don't need the word call right here. So I've left that out in what I'm going to show. I don't understand why you need this word macros right here. I wish that they would explain this kind of stuff, because that's the kind of stuff that's good to know. You know, they're sort of just like, stick that in there and it'll make this work, but why? So I've got a polyline here, and in the label I've put some macro calls. And I've got some text boxes here that I've put some stuff in so you could read them, because if you open up text macro management and open up one of these macros, I'm sitting, you know, a foot away from the screen, and I can't even hardly read this. So I've just taken that information and put it in these text boxes. So this is what shows up in the label for this polyline. Not exactly, but I'll explain that in a second. So here you can see I've left off that call. You have to have the dot, macros, dot a, dot, open parent, and then what I want to talk about is using multiple arguments to the macros, which to me is the kind of the opens up some possibilities. So I'll give you a quick demo just before I explain how it works. Over here I've got these are all just area, right? Area. but I've added some parameters. Like I'm going to change this last one. Right now it's showing square yards. 0.66667 square yards. And I'm going to change it to where it shows square inches like I'm showing right here. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to come over here, and instead of square yards, I'm going to replace YD with IN. Again, I know you can't see that, but trust me. And then you can see over here, it changed to 864 square inches. If I want that to be square feet, I can change the IN to FT. And again, this is just number formatter stuff, and it's defined in the reference guide. So now it's 6 square feet, which matches 6 feet squared and this one. So I've got two macros, A and B, and I'm going to talk about B because that's the one we were just looking at, and this is B over here. So when you create this proc, you can set it up where it can take multiple values. Val is the same as the original. That's just in this case, it's area over here. And then I've got S, X, and Y. And of course, I should have named these with variable names that made sense, but I didn't. S. If you look down here, formatter unit equals S. That's what I was changing. When I changed this square inches to square feet or square yards, I'm passing it in as a string, and that gets substituted down here in place of this S. The other thing I'm doing is passing in number of decimal places I want to show as X. Again, I should have written decimal places or something, but if you don't pass a value, for instance, if I did not pass a value for decimal places, you need to set something. And you can test that if X equals nil. If there's no value in X, Ruby puts a nil in there, and you can test for that. And in this case, I'm just setting it to 8 as the default. And the same down here. Formatter.show trailing zeros. This is a true false value. So I'm either going to pass in Y, I'm going to pass nothing, or I'm going to pass true, or I'm going to pass false. And up here you can see that I'm passing true. So I'm saying I want 5 decimal places, and I want to see trailing zeros. And if you look over here, that's what it's doing. It's showing trailing zeros. In this case, they're all zeros. And there's 5 of them. So let's go back and change that. I'm going to change decimal places to 2. And say OK. And you can see now it's 6.00 down here. And I can change true to false. And say OK. And that just shows 6 square feet. Of course, in your macro, you can do rounding, you can do whatever you want. But the sort of the key is, and again, what I wanted to really demonstrate in this is that you can have multiple arguments to a proc. And that sort of, instead of having a unique I'm just going to stick with number formatting because that's what we're talking about, sort of. Instead of having a unique number formatter for each individual situation, like maybe sometimes you want to display 2 decimal places, maybe sometimes you want to display 8. Maybe you sometimes want to show trailing zeros, maybe sometimes you don't. Maybe you want to switch up the units sometimes. Maybe you want to show square feet, square inches. Maybe you want to do metric. I don't have any idea if this will work. I'm going to try square meters. Looks like that worked. 0.56 square meters. I'm going to put a C in front of that M, see if we can do centimeters. Looks like that worked. Now I'm not going to do the math to check that out, but it's obviously changing the number in the correct direction. So instead of having a separate macro to do square feet, square inches, square centimeters, you can have a single macro and just pass in whatever you want. So this was kind of quick, and I didn't put a whole bunch of thought and a bunch of testing or anything into this. I just wanted to get something out there. A lot of times, it's kind of like getting over a hump. Once you get over a hump, downhill's a lot easier. And if you can see how some of this stuff works, it'll sort of open up the door, and people can think of uses for this. Again, I want to emphasize that this is not just for the number formatter. This is just an easy way to demonstrate this. You can create a proc and pass one or more variables to it to do whatever you want. It wouldn't even need to return. It's not something that you would need to do to return anything. It doesn't need to be visible anywhere. You could use this as a setup. You could use this to set global variables, for instance. I'm still not clear on how all this stuff gets executed. One of my requests a long time ago was that we have the ability to run a macro or a series of macros when the program, or when a plan gets opened or a layout gets opened. We really need, I think, the ability to run some things as part of a setup. There's been all kinds of conversations on the forum about how you get macros to run. You have to display something, or you have to click something, or you have to manually do stuff, and that seems kind of ridiculous to me. You ought to be able to have something run to initiate some things automatically, and then everything just works. So anyway, I hope this gives you some ideas. Again, I'm not a Ruby programmer, so I'm just kind of making this stuff up as I go.